Alright, so welcome back to my derivatives video lesson, whatever. So far we've talked about the formal definition, the alternate definition of a derivative, and also some of the common rules you'll use to find derivatives, like the constant multiple rule, the constant rule, the power rule, product rule, sum difference rule, quotient rule, and all that stuff. So now I'm going to be talking about just specific functions in general, and I'll start with the trigonometric functions, as those are encountered quite frequently in calculus. So the first derivative that you're going to need to know is the derivative of the sine function. Yeah. So the derivative of the sine function is just cosine. So I mean, that's pretty simple, you know. The derivative of sine of x is cosine of x. Next, I'm gonna the derivative of cosine of x, and this is just negative sine of x. So in case you haven't noticed, the cosine and cosine, if you just keep taking derivatives, they follow a pattern. So if you start with sine of x, hopefully you find the derivative of that, it's cosine of x. The derivative of that, negative sine. Derivative of negative sine using the constant multiple rule, because you know, the constant is -1, would be negative cosine, and the derivative of negative cosine of x is sine of x. So it's just a cycle, sine and cosine. It should be really easy to remember, so I'm not too worried about it. And now for the other four trigonometric functions, I'll start with tangent. The derivative of tangent is secant squared of x. The other four trigonometric functions, the derivatives that aren't, you know, these two, I recommend you memorize for your upcoming quiz or test or whatever. But either way, they should ultimately be memorized. But just in case you can't remember, you can always just rewrite the trigonometric function to find the derivative. So for tangent, you know, you should have known from pre-calculus that tangent of x is just sine x over cosine of x. So using the quotient rule, we can do cosine of x times cosine of x minus sine of x negative sine of x over cosine squared of x, and that's cosine squared x minus plus sine squared x, sorry, over cosine squared x. And of course, you know, there's a trig identity that this is equal to 1, so that just becomes 1 over cosine squared of x, and that's just secant squared of x. So you can do this for pretty much all of the trigonometric functions, but I wouldn't recommend relying on that. I would memorize them, but I mean, I guess it's good to just try deriving all 6 of them, just for the sake of your learning and trying out quotient rule and all that. But you know, these aren't hard functions to memorize the derivatives of, so you should definitely remember within a couple days. So the next derivative is the cosecant. The derivative of cosecant of x is equal to negative cosecant x cotangent x. So yeah, I don't think that one's too hard to remember either. Next is the derivative of secant of x. So that's just negative cosecant squared of x. And finally, we have the derivative of oh, sorry, I messed up. The derivative of secant x is secant x times the tangent of x. And finally, the derivative of cotangent of x equals negative cosecant squared of x. So just to I guess show you all of these functions. So here we are, and what you'll notice is that the ones that start with c, that like cosine, cosecant, cotangent, are negative. I mean, I guess if you remember the rules, you shouldn't really need to remember that fact, but I don't know, I feel like that helps me a little bit, so I thought I'd mention it.